Order the Local Agency Formation Commission meeting for April 15th, 2020. This meeting will proceed as a teleconference in compliance with the waivers to certain Brown Act provisions under the governor's executive orders in response to the COVID-19 state of emergency. The agenda posted on the Commission's website and at the meeting location notify members of the public that there will be no physical location from which members of the public may participate in this meeting. However, the agenda and the information on the Commission's website provide members of the public with information that they may participate in the meeting by joining the meeting virtually, by phone, or viewing the meeting live by following the provided instructions. The agenda also provides members of the public the ability to provide comment when participating via Zoom video conferencing or Zoom via phone by either clicking the raise hand button from the Zoom browser.
Next slide. Go to the next slide.
Please mute all the staff, please mute your phone. And for those on Zoom via phone, they can also raise their hands by pressing *9. Comments and testimony are limited to 3 minutes. Additionally, the agenda also informs members of the public that they may submit written comments by emailing to the provided email or through the Commission's website, a public comment link no later than 7:30 a.m. on the meeting day. These comments are testimony, and testimony will be read onto the meeting record at the appropriate time. So now we can call the meeting roll call. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bagley?
I'm here.
Commissioner Cox?
Present.
Commissioner Curtalo? Commissioner Curtalo? Commissioner Lovingood?
Here.
Commissioner McAllen?
Here.
Commissioner Rao?
Good morning.
Commissioner Warren?
I'm here.
Commissioner Dennison?
Here.
Commissioner Rutherford? Commissioner Amos? Commissioner Farrell?
Here.
And one more time, Commissioner Curtalo.
May have dropped off for some reason, or he's on mute,
Okay.
one or the other. Okay, if we can put up the flag.
Jeff, please go to the next slide with the flag, please.
Okay, would you all please join me as we salute the flag of our nation? I pledge allegiance
Pledge
to
allegiance
the flag
to the flag
The flag.
of the United
States of America,
America
to the
and
republic
to the republic for which it stands,
For which
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice.
liberty and justice for all.
So anyone present at the hearing who is involved with any of the changes of organization to be considered and who has made a contribution of more than $250 in the past 12 months to any member of the commission will be asked to state for the record the commission member to whom the contribution has been made and the matter of consideration with which they are involved. Is there anyone who wishes to make that statement? Hearing none, before we begin, I have one more statement. The following will be the manner in which the commission will consider items during this meeting. I will first call on staff to make a presentation for the item on the agenda. And following the presentation, to avoid, I would like everyone to be on mute. And if you can, use the raise hand shown under the participants panel, which you can find at the bottom of the screen. If you click on that, it'll raise up all the attendees, and at the bottom of that small square will be a mute me and a raise hand. If you could raise hand, Also on the phone, there are provisions and instructions on how you raise your hand when you're on the phone. And then I will call on the commissioner's name and you can proceed by asking your question. I will then ask the clerk whether any members of the public have submitted written comments for the item. Then staff will see if anyone on the video conference or on the phone wishes to make a comment. I will come back to the commissioners again to see if there's any further discussion. After the round of questions, if the item is an action item, I will then ask for a motion and request that the commissioners making the motion or seconding identify themselves for members of the public listening on the phone. I will then ask the clerk to do the roll call vote. Let's move on to the consent item, which are items that are expected to be routine and non-controversial, and unless a request has been received prior to the hearing to discuss the matter, we will take them one all together. Are there any consent items deferred for discussion?
Yes,
Mr.
Chair.
Chair, there has been, oh, go ahead.
This is Dennison.
Yes.
One matter of housekeeping on the minutes of February 19th. It was shown that I was speaking instead for you. It would have been for Commissioner Warren at the time.
Okay, so we want to make that correction. Anybody else? Okay, could I, yes, Kimberly?
I was just going to make the motion when you were ready, Chair.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Cox. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Commissioner Lovingood. Would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bagley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Aye.
Commissioner Curtalo. In his absence, I will call Commissioner Farrell,
Aye.
Commissioner Lovingood,
Yes.
Commissioner McAllen,
Yes.
Commissioner Rao,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
That's a unanimous vote, and we'll move on now to our public hearing items. Item 5 is a follow-up on the city of Atlanta relating to LAFCO 3232 and our continuing monitoring of the city. I will now open the public hearing and have staff make a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 5 is an update on the City of Atalanta's sustainability. We've had 2 updates since the Commission took the action to reduce the city's sphere of influence in April 2019. One update was in September 2019, and the most recent one was in January. Since then, the city has completed the fiscal year 2016-17 audit. Today, the city is going to make a presentation to the Commission. However, I do want to just point out that staff is recommending that the Commission receive and file this report and schedule another update for the August 2020 LAFCO hearing, unless otherwise directed by the Commission. And so with that, I will turn it over to the city. I believe we have either Mr. Jesse Flores, the city manager, Mr. Ward Commerce, the city's finance director, and I think I saw Mayor Gabriel Reyes, who is also on as well. So with that, we're gonna have to switch this over from us to the city so they can have control on their presentation. So give us just a few seconds to do that.
Good morning. Sorry to interrupt. This is Louisa. I've joined you by phone.
I'm now
Larry and
to Mr. Comers.
Hi, this is Ward Comers. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. The mayor of Atalanto, Mayor Reyes, is on the line. So I was going to ask if you could give him an opportunity to speak first.
Sure.
So Jeffrey, I don't know if you can see him, or the mayor might need to raise his hand using the app, but
Can you please ask him to raise his hand? Oh, yeah, there you go. I see it. I have unmuted him. You're allowed to talk right now.
Go ahead, Ms. Mayor Reyes.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you so much for giving us the opportunity to be before you today, LAFCO commissioners. I hope that you're all doing well and your loved ones are doing well during this COVID, pandemic that we're going through. But just to get started and respect everybody's time, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity you've provided us to give you an update on our current audit status. I would like to let you know that the current leadership and management staff is truly 100% committed for a successful outcome for our city, not just with being physically responsible, but moving forward as a city. As many of you know, I became the mayor of the city here in 2018, and I was immediately briefed by our city manager. For many years, there was mismanagement of the city's resources and negative financial findings that dated back to 2014. However, under my administration, that is no longer the case. If you allow me to explain, I'll share a couple of things that we've done to implement more physical responsibility and ways that we plan on moving the city forward so that we don't fall into these situations ever again. The city manager made it a top priority to hire an outside private sector firm to be our consultants and remedy this issue. I can assure you that these individuals have been working around the clock, including weekends, holidays, to build our city up and to bring our financial audits current. I'm very proud of the work that they have done and the dedication that they've shown to the city. There's been several meetings that I've come to the city, and I would see them there weeks at a time, gathering the information, working hand in hand with staff. And it was great to see that we had an entity that was just as committed as the city to make sure that we're able to get caught up with all of these audits that unfortunately we were behind. I'm very proud of their work, like I did just mention. This has been a tremendous undertaking that most of us were not anticipating. When I was campaigning, I was thinking about, the things that I'd love to focus on moving forward, but not knowing the reality, I didn't know what it was that we were walking into. But nevertheless, we have made a great deal of progress in a very short amount of time. Mr. Combs doesn't go over all the progress that we've made, all the work that has been done, and our timeline, our tentative timeline that we plan on being able to be completed. Now, I believe that this is our third presentation that we'll be bringing before the LAFCO Commission. And every time that we've come before you, we have made, I believe, great strides to get caught up with our audits and showing promises in a result to consider the facts, right? We've been committed, we've been serious about not being negligent with our audits and our finances. It's unfortunate that we had to deal with this, but that was the reality at hand. This morning, you're going to hear from Mr. Combs, who will do a presentation with a PowerPoint that shows a path to a successful, bright future for the city of Adelanto. LAFCO commissioners, I want to say more than ever, we do need your support. We need our support from our government agencies like yourselves, the board of directors, our state and federal government, to assist us in achieving these future goals. So I can't stress enough how appreciative I am of allowing us to continue to give you updates and to show you that we are on a path to rectify these situations. You, like yourself, I hate the delays. I hate the fact that, well, I can't say hate. It's unfortunate that as we do these audits and we move forward, that there is delays. And Mr. Combs will go over some of those delays on what has slowed us down. It's not because of staff. It's not because the auditors aren't trying to get it done. It's, again, negligence that we find in these periods. So with that being said, I would love to turn this over to Mr. Combs. And again, I want to take this opportunity to tell you thank you for your continuous support to every single member on the commission. I also want to thank Mr. Sam Martinez and the LAFCO staff for their flexibility and their assistance throughout this progress. Trust me, it does not go unnoticed. Your consideration and your time is very much appreciated this morning. And Ward, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to you And commissioners, if you do have any questions for me, I will remain on the call. If there's anything else that you may have or want to know in regards to things that we've implemented as a council, or any other question that you may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, thank you very much. Ward Comers, Finance Director. Can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, very good. We will get into this. Make sure I can control the screen here.
There you go.
Okay, here we go. So we're going to start off today with a little quote from C.S. Lewis. You can't go back to the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And that is kind of what the philosophy is right now. I think the mayor touched on that a little bit. We can't really go back and change the conditions that got the city into the situation that it was in, but we can fix things going forward, and that's what we're doing right now. So what I'll talk about today is the status of the city audits. The commission asked at the last meeting that we go over the internal control findings. So we will do that as briefly as possible. We'll talk about the city's financial condition and then briefly touch on some financial stability measures. Okay, so status of the city audits. By late 2018, the city audits had become 4 years behind. The APUA, which is the Public Utility Authority audit, had become 1 year behind by late 2018. As the mayor mentioned, the city manager retained an outside consulting firm in September of 2018 to address the issue, basically to get caught up on all the audits. The progress we've made to date, we've completed the fiscal year 14-15, 15-16, 16-17 city audits, and the fiscal year 17-18 APUA audit. The audits that are remaining are the fiscal year 17-18, 18-19, and the 18-19 APUA audit. So here's a timeline of the audit completion and then what's remaining. The first city audit for fiscal year 14-15, we started that process on September 12th, 2018. The audit was completed on June 20th, 2019. It took 281 days to complete. And if you'll remember at the last commission meeting, I talked about briefly that you were getting your audit at that time. And it typically takes 180 days to complete an audit. There we go, thanks. So the first audit took 281 days, where normal is 180 days to finish an audit. There were many reasons why the first audit took 281 days. I won't go into those in too much detail, but basically the city's accounting records were in disarray at the time. So city staff and the audit firm and the outside consulting firm had to get all the records in order first. So that took a considerable effort. When we started on this adventure, we thought all the city's accounting had been done and properly recorded, and that we just needed to prepare the statements for the auditors. And we thought we would be done in 3 to 6 months. Well, as soon as we started on September 12th, after about a week, we realized that the accounting, the financial records were not in order, and that we'd have to go through and make many corrections. The APUA audit for fiscal year 17-18, that took 336 days to complete. The reason that took so long is because it is ahead, 2 or 3 fiscal years ahead, depending on how you want to look at it, of the city's audit. So that audit couldn't begin until the city's financial records got caught up enough to where the financial records for the APUA were accurate. So that took a little bit longer. The second city audit for fiscal year 15-16, that took 173 days to complete. So that's actually a little bit less or a little bit faster than the 180 days that is normal. The city's fiscal year 16-17 audit, that was completed in 140 days. That's the most recent audit that's been completed. That was completed on February 18th of 2020. We have provided a copy of that financial report to LAFCO staff. There are 3 audits remaining. There's two city audits and an APUA audit. Right now, I know at the last commission meeting, we were hoping to have 2 audits prepared for you to discuss. Obviously, because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, that has severely impacted our schedule. Our audit firm has had to furlough or lay off some of their staff, some of the staff that was working on our audit. So they're down to basically 1. They've had up to 4 auditors working on the city audits, and now they're down to 1.5. So it's taking them a lot longer because of COVID to complete the audits. Regardless, we were hoping to have the 17-18 city audit completed by May 31st. That would be 174 days completed if we can hit that timeline. The 18-19 city audit, we're looking at June 30th. That would be 176 days to complete. And then the APUA audit, we're going to start that April 30th. Again, we need the records to get caught up for the city to finish that one. Also, the audit firm that is doing the city audits is going to be performing the APUA audit. So they can't do, because of staffing issues, they can't do 2 audits at once. So they need to finish the city audits first before they can work on the APUA audit. Okay, the internal control findings for the fiscal year 16-17 audit. There's basically 2 types of audit findings. There's a material weakness and there's a significant deficiency. I won't read the definition, but material weakness is a serious condition, and the significant deficiency is just something to pay attention to and to fix. So we had 5 material weaknesses identified. There were 6 significant deficiencies. The corrective measures were identified, and we have started implementing those in late 2018. Because these findings are historical, going back to 2014, 2015 fiscal year, they're going to be reported in every audit until we're caught up. And it might take actually one extra audit year until all these findings drop off, because we can't go back and fix the problems in the past. They will continue to be reported. So I'll just briefly go through each of the findings. Again, the first 5 are material weaknesses. So the first one is that the city's financial close and reporting process was behind. Basically, the city was not closing its books in a timely manner. The corrective action is ongoing here. We can't close the fiscal years because we're working in multiple fiscal years right now. We have started to close the 14-15 fiscal year. We will soon be closing the 15-16 fiscal year. So this corrective action is ongoing, and the finding will be resolved when the audit is complete in 2020. The second audit finding is that there was no formal written payroll and accounting policies and procedures in place. We have implemented 5 policies so far that went before the council. We are preparing additional policies and procedures to be implemented. Most importantly, though, is that beginning in 2018, when we came in, that's when I started, September of 2018, we immediately started changing the practices, the internal practices of the finance staff. So we started following best practice, even though we may not have a formal written documented procedure. Staff is following proper accounting internal controls. Again, this finding will be resolved at the completion of the fiscal year 18-19 audit. The third finding is that for the APUA, there are a large number of outstanding checks. So the city did not have in place, or the APUA did not have an unclaimed funds policy in place. So we have implemented the unclaimed funds policy, and now staff needs to go through and follow the proper procedures for posting those and then working through that list. So the corrective action is ongoing. We're looking to have this resolved in 2020. The next internal control finding, bank reconciliations were being prepared by an individual that was also an authorized signer of the bank accounts. So one of the first things we did when we got here was to change or update the city's authorized signers list. So now it's the city manager, the city clerk, and the finance director. Those are the authorized signers. The person that, or people that are doing bank reconciliations are not authorized signers anymore. So this corrective action was completed in January of 2019. Okay, the next one is that the city had evaluation of its capital assets performed. And long story short is that we didn't include a development, DR Horton development properly as part of the city's assets. So to ensure this doesn't happen again, we're developing policies and procedures so that when a housing development or commercial development is, the public portion is turned over to the city, that we properly value those assets and record them. Again, this corrective action is ongoing. We're looking forward to having this done in 2020. Okay, the next internal control finding is that the cash disbursement and purchasing policies of the city were not being followed. One of the first things I did when I got here is I observed that the city was not issuing purchase orders for anything that was being purchased. And the staff at the time was not following the municipal code, the purchasing portion of the municipal code. So within days of discovering that, we implemented a PO process within the city. So nothing is purchased without a purchase order being issued and proper approvals and authority and budget. So we are actually following the purchasing procedures that are outlined in the city's municipal code. So even though this status says that corrective action is ongoing, it's actually complete in my view. We are looking at updating the city's purchasing portion of the municipal code. But as far as this item is concerned, we are following the code. And so this is considered closed. Okay, the next item is that bank reconciliations were completed several months after the close of each month. So we have implemented a bank reconciliation policy that sets forth the timing of when bank reconciliations are completed. And we are current on our bank reconciliations. So we consider this finding resolved. However, it will continue to appear on the internal control reports from the auditor. Okay, next is payroll rate approvals. So when the auditor was testing payroll controls, they found that the personnel action forms, basically documenting a change in pay rate for an employee, did not exist. So we have, and this goes back to, again, September of 2018, we implemented a new form and new process internally to correct this and make sure that there's proper authorized signatures and proper documentation for any payroll or pay rate adjustments. So even though the status on this is listed as ongoing, we consider this to be closed However, it will continue to show up on our reports. Next is the construction recycling deposits. Basically, when state law mandates that for construction projects that contractors separate out recyclable materials, and there are two ways to enforce that. One is to accept a deposit from the contractor, and if they aren't complying with the law, then you can withhold their deposit. The other way is to just do inspections with code enforcement. The city at the time opted for collecting deposits for construction recycling, and staff did not have the policies and procedures in place to monitor the deposits and then the refunding of the deposits. So that is how this finding came about. What we're going to do, because it's a administrative chore or extra work to receive the deposits and refund the deposits and track the deposits, we have decided to go take the option 2 for construction recycling and make it an enforcement action and not a deposit-based fee. So even though this item is listed as ongoing, we're going to change how we do this process within the city. So beginning, I think, July 1, we will no longer be accepting construction deposits, recycling deposits, and we will use enforcement to ensure compliance. So this internal control finding will be going away. Next is cash management. There were several adjustments made at the fiscal year to reimburse the general fund for expenditures from prior years. So because the city was not, one, the city wasn't properly recording its transactions, and then 2, the city wasn't properly closing its fiscal years, changes and corrections were being made back and forth between fiscal years, which that's not something you want to do. So we have implemented policies basically outlining the procedures for closing the year end and proper recording of actions. This item is ongoing, listed ongoing, but we consider that once we get through all the audits, we will close all the fiscal years, and then this won't be happening any longer. Okay, the next one is maintenance of minutes. So this finding is that the city clerk's office had fallen behind in maintaining minutes. We have obtained an outside consultant to assist with the minutes so we don't fall behind. So this, and the city clerk is all caught up on the minutes, so we consider this finding to be resolved. Okay, now that I'm through that portion, I want to talk briefly about the city's financial position. So I think as the commission has been briefed, the city has had a structural deficit going back at least to 2010. There's been structural deficit issues within the city, probably going back to the early 90s, maybe even sooner. And there's many reasons for that. And some of those I can talk about today. One of those is the 1985 Caltrans Freeway Agreement. This agreement limited the number of intersections in the city to, I think, 7 intersections. Also, when this agreement designated Highway 395 through the city of Adelanto as a freeway corridor. So when you drive through Adelanto on 395, you will see the Caltrans easement go about 150 feet each side of Highway 395. So what this agreement has essentially done is limit any economic development along 395. All the property that borders 395 cannot be developed because it cannot be accessed from 395 because Caltrans considers that area a freeway. So the other cities that have that border 395, Hesperia and Victorville, they do not have this agreement in place. And that is why they've been able to develop along 395. So it's very important for the city to work with the state, Caltrans, probably also the county transportation agency, to address this issue so that we can have development all along the 395 corridor. The next issue is insufficient tax base. So one, our property tax allocation is less than 2%. Most cities have between 7 and 12%. I reached out to Michael Coleman, who is the foremost expert on municipal finance in California. He's literally wrote the book on municipal finance. And I asked him if he had any suggestions about what we could do about this situation. And at first he didn't believe me. He said, it's impossible that your property tax allocation is so low. Go back and look at your numbers. And I said, well, I guess I better go back and look at my numbers. And then he called me about an hour later and said, no, you're right. I've never seen anything so low. It's almost criminal that it's so low. So that's something that that needs to be addressed either at the state level, at the county level, working with the city to increase our property tax allocation. Next is sales tax revenue for the city. So for example, the fourth quarter of 2019, the per capita sales in the city was $1,263. So compare that to San Bernardino County as a whole, sales is $4,500 per capita. So the city's sales tax is extremely low because there is no point of sales within the city because of lack of economic development, which is again related to the Caltrans Freeway Agreement. The per capita sales for the city of Adelanto ranks 495 out of 539 agencies in California. So we are at the bottom of the list in terms of our sales tax revenue. Also, unfortunately, in this time, we have to consider the impact of coronavirus on the city's budget. Right now, we're estimating a 20% decline in revenue for the next fiscal year. We have no idea. I mean, no one really knows what's going to happen. We're just all making our best guess. But our best educated guess is that we're going to have a $2.3 million revenue reduction for next fiscal year. This pie chart shows the city's property tax share relative to the other agencies. And my very, now I can call myself a senior, my senior eyes have a hard time reading this chart, but the highlighted section, you can see that Adelanto gets 1.75% of the property tax allocation for our area, compared to, Adelanto Elementary School, which gets 21.58%. The county gets 16.5%. Flood control gets more than the city at 2.62%. So this shows relative to the other agencies within our tax reporting area, the allocation of property tax, and Adelanto barely gets anything. Okay, the next chart depicts the revenues and expenditures for the city going back to fiscal year 11-12. And the red line is the expenditures and the green line is the revenue. So what you want to see is the green above the red, and that would be a surplus condition. However, the red line is above the green for all these years. And so basically the city has had a structural deficit going back to 11-12. And we've in 18-19, we got very close to closing that gap. However, because of the COVID and some other things, it's been challenging. Moving forward, you can see that the gap widens in fiscal year 2021. Again, that's the majority of that is because of the COVID 20% revenue reduction.
Can I ask whoever's typing to mute your mic, please?
The next chart shows the general fund balance. So you can see in fiscal year 11-12, the city had a general fund balance of 16.81 million. The general fund balance, reserve balance has steadily declined. The general fund balance is actually in a negative situation right now. The general fund has had to borrow, do internal borrowing from the other funds to continue operations. So financial stability measures that we can do. So there's revenue enhancements. The city passed the cannabis tax measure in 2016. That's bringing in $1.5 million to the general fund a year. We are in the process of increasing fees within the city. The last time the city increased its fees was in 2004. So we're 16 years behind in updating our fees. We expect that'll bring in about $500,000 a year to the general fund. We've also undertaken what's called a cost allocation plan. So essentially the general fund was unequally supporting some of the other funds like the water fund. And so having a proper cost allocation plan will allow those funds to pay their fair share of expenses. So that will save the general fund about $1 million a year. We have reduced expenses. We have negotiated labor savings of almost $1 million a year. That includes the city has laid off several staff. The city offered a golden handshake package. And so we've reduced staff by, I believe, 13 employees over the last year. And then economic development. So we've been working on increasing housing and the population so that we can broaden our tax base. Again, some of the tax measures that we have tried. The city in 2014 tried to pass a utility users tax. That failed. As I mentioned, the cannabis tax measure passed in 2016, which was very helpful. We are proposing to the city council and will be proposing to the voters of Adelanto a vacant land tax. The city of Adelanto is 55 square miles. About 70% of that area is vacant. And so it is not adding to the revenue of the city. So we're looking at a vacant land tax similar to what the city of Oakland and the city of Richmond have done. As far as I know, there's only 2 cities in the state that have passed this sort of tax. But we are going to look at this. That could bring in about $3 million per year to the city's general fund. Another thing we're considering is annexing into the fire district with the FP5. General fund savings here could be $2 million a year to the city's general fund. And then lastly, which is especially pertinent to the LAFCO commission, is that it would be extremely helpful to the city if we could annex the LAFCO Area C. It's a prime area for housing. It is surrounded by the city of Adelanto, basically on 3 sides. We have many developers that want to develop homes in that area. But right now that is not within the city. Another benefit of annexing into Area C is that the minimum property tax allocation would be 7%, compared to now we get a 2% allocation. So by annexing in that Area C and then developing homes there would greatly add to the city's property tax revenue. And here's just a reminder of the map of the city, and Area C is at the bottom there with the purple hashing. As you can see, it's surrounded in pink by the city. The city's high school is in that area. And so that's a prime area for development. It's all vacant right now, for the most part. So in conclusion, As the mayor mentioned, the city is actively implementing public policy to ensure financial stability. The city administration is focused on implementing policies and procedures, enhancing revenue and controlling our expenditures, complying with the public accounting regulations, economic development. That is the key to crossing the line of the green and the red. So we're not in a structural deficit anymore. And I also want to stress again that the city is in desperate need of cooperation from the federal, state, county governments. We need the state to cooperate with us on the 395 freeway agreement. We need the county to cooperate with us on the property tax allocation, other economic development activities within the city. We also need the help of LAFCO to annex Area C, to annex into the fire district. Those things are key in the long-term financial stability of the city. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your patience. I know it's some of that is a long slog going through all the internal control findings, but
Thank you very much for your presentation. And commissioners, if you wish to comment, please raise your hand. Robert Lovingood. Unmute if you're mute. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Robert.
sorry about that. Made a mistake. I mean, there's really kind of a, can you report back when you're saying this all started in 2018 as far as kind of addressing outstanding issues, is that correct?
yeah, so in 2018, the new city manager came on board, and then in December 2018, the new council was elected. And so when the city manager came on, that's when the mitigation efforts began.
Okay, so a couple different things. What's the current balance, and going back for some time, of your water fund and what's been allocated there? And currently, where is the city securing its water from?
So I don't have the water fund balance with me right now. The water fund has been in a surplus condition, a financial surplus. So the APUA is in good, strong financial condition. It's been running like a $2 million surplus for the last several years. Also, the APUA there's been a loan between the city and the APUA, and the APUA is just about finished with repaying its loan to the city. So that will free up an additional $2 million a year in revenue for the APUA. So the APUA is in a very strong financial condition. In terms of where we're getting our water from, I'm not the expert on that area, but we're getting it from multiple sources. We have our own water pump field where we pump our own water. We are also getting water from the city of Victorville. We are also getting water from the Mojave Water Agency RQ project.
Okay. Well, and so also on your cannabis statement before last reported, there were like 18% of compliance reported and actual payments. Do you guys have the financial status of that?
I can't address that number specifically, but I can say that the city has increased its tax compliance efforts. So basically, we've probably doubled the compliance rate over the last starting in January of 2020. So we've got 2 staff that are working on tax compliance issues. They're auditing the cannabis businesses to ensure that they're paying. So the tax compliance rate has gone up significantly in the last 6 months.
Okay. Are you aware of the changes that FP5 is going to be going to the ballot for the voters to vote on this year?
We were made aware of that yesterday, yes.
Okay, so even with the additional FP5 and then with your hoping of passing a property tax, there's still quite substantial. The line just it just keeps growing, even with that. So how was I'm looking at your chart on your balances with projections, and I don't see even with the 3 and the 5 where you're going to make a change. And then for clarity, is based on another thing you're asking that the county reduces its tax because when the city incorporated, the revenue sharing between the schools and the other agency wasn't well thought out. Is that also a request?
In terms of closing the gap, so we're looking at about a $5 million structural deficit for next year. So if we could get the vacant land tax passed, that'd be $3 million. If FP5 continues, that could be $2 million right there. Just between those two items, we basically closed the gap. There's also some other, we can also increase the cannabis tax. That is an option on the table to bring in additional revenue. So between those 3 items, we can close the deficit. Longer term, however, the property tax allocation, as you mentioned, at 2%, that's something that we're asking be addressed because it is unfairly low relative to every other city in the state. We don't know why it's so low, but it is several of my cohorts have said it's unjust that we have a 2% property allocation. So we're not necessarily asking for the county to give up theirs, but we're asking that the county work with the city on readjusting the allocation so that the city gets at least a 7% allocation. It's a zero-sum game, so whatever the city gets, someone else has to give up, which is unfortunate, but the unjustness of this property tax allocation needs to be addressed in the city's opinion.
And no further questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Warren?
Hi, I just wanted to comment that you're not the only city not receiving a just property tax allocation. Fontana's is very low also, and we have been trying to partner with our state legislators for the last 2 years to try to resolve that, and in some cases with our vehicle license fees also. So I think going forward, you'll find people ready to champion with you on that cause, but I almost feel like we better all tell ourselves good luck with that. But I appreciate the comprehensive presentation that you made. It gave me a bigger or a more clearer picture of what you're grappling with. And you're not alone. There are other cities that are approximately around that same amount. But I will be sending your mayor a letter that we will be circulating to our congressional partners, which we call our legislators at the congressional level, to try to get this bill that they're about to pass to basically allow funding to come to local agencies, which is our cities. And also we are starting to work closer with our supervisors as mayors. We had a great conference call yesterday that our chairman, Kirk Hadman, held. And your mayor, Gabriel, should have been on that call, but we're working hard to make sure we let all the mayors know about those calls because they're very informative and they do allow us to come together. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. And Commissioner Warren, you're absolutely right. The city of Fontana is basically the only other city that is close to Adelanto's property tax allocation. So I'm remiss in not mentioning that.
Well, a lot of it had to do with redevelopment, and also we have a fire district. So all those accounting efforts at some point, but we've had backlash when we tried because it does affect the county. But at some point, I'm thinking the county and the mayors can sit down and begin to work together to resolve all of our issues. Yes. And not just blame anybody for what happened in the past. Let's move forward and try to rectify it or fix it. So it's all good.
I too want to thank you very much for the detailed presentation. I think we all have a better picture of of Atlanta's situation, and it's very helpful to understand all of those issues. Anybody, any other commissioner wish to make comments or have questions of Atlanta? Seeing none, Ms. Jones, are there any written comments submitted for this item?
No public comments for this item.
Okay, I will now call on the public on Zoom who wish to speak on this item. Please click the raise hand button, or for those on Zoom via phone, please raise your hands by pressing *9. Seeing none, at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Commissioners that want to speak, Kimberly.
Thank you, Chair McCallan. I would like to move staff's recommendation. I'm so pleased with the progress that we've seen Adelanto make to date. It's a long road ahead, but it sounds like they have the right team in place to accomplish that.
Motion by Cox. Is there a second?
I'd like to second that.
Second by Commissioner Warren. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bagley.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Please, other than accepting this as a file and report, what action is being requested? Because I'm not clear with that.
We're being asked to have them come back in, I believe, August was what the date.
That's correct. We're supposed to come back in August for another update.
So again, is this just not a receipt and file and that we have them back on the calendar in August? Is there actually a call for action?
Called for, we're directing that they come back to the commission, the staff, to bring them back in August.
All right.
That's the reason for the vote. Ms. Jones, please proceed with the vote.
Commissioner Bagley.
Yes.
Commissioners.
Aye.
Commissioner.
Did you say Cox or?
You're breaking up, Ms. Jones.
I did say Cox.
Okay, aye.
Commissioner Kuratalo.
I received a text from Commissioner Curtalo. He says he can hear everything, but he cannot speak to you.
Okay. Then I will call Commissioner Farrell in instead.
Aye, yes.
Commissioner Lovingood.
Yes.
Commissioner McCallan.
Yes.
Commissioner Rao.
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor and staff from Atlanta, for your presentation, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in August.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
That item passed unanimously. We'll move on to item 6, which is a consideration of the review of mitigated net for the county for a general plan amendment, tentative tract map 220267, and a conditional use permit on approximately 4.7 acres as CEQA responsible agent for LAFCO SC number 449 and LAFCO SC number 449, City of Montclair, irrevocable agreement to annex for sewer service. I'll now open the public hearing and have staff make a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The City of Montclair, on behalf of the property owner and the developer, has submitted an application for commission review, requesting authorization to extend sewer service outside its corporate boundaries. And the agreement relates to a single parcel, assessor parcel number 1011-351-02, which is generally located. Jeff, next slide, please. located on the south side of Mission Boulevard between Vernon and Benson Avenue. The conditions of approval placed on the project requires that they connect to the city's sewer facilities. Staff has reviewed this request for the sewer service by the city of Montclair outside its boundaries against the criteria established by the commission as well as state law. The parcel to be served is within the sphere of influence for the city of Montclair and is anticipated to become a part of the city at some point in the future. And the proposed development requires that it receive sewer service from the city of Montclair, and as outlined, which is outlined in the conditions of approval for the project. And finally, staff supports the city's request since the sewer infrastructure is close to the anticipated development and that there are no other existing entity available to provide its service for the area. So staff recommends that the commission approve LAFCO service contract 449 by taking the recommended actions on page 1 of the staff report. Jeff, please, next slide. And those are also on your display, the recommended actions for your consideration. And that ends my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Commissioners, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Seeing none, Ms. Jones, were there any written comments submitted for this item?
No, sir, no written comments for this item.
Okay, I will now call on the public on Zoom who wish to speak on this item. Please click the raise hand button, or for those on Zoom via phone, please raise your hands by pressing *9. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation and action. Commissioners? Is there a motion?
So moved. It's Curatello.
Curatello finally joined us.
I'm sorry, it hasn't. I've been hanging up on me too, Larry. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Commissioner Cox? Unmute. Commissioner Cox, you have your hand raised.
Chair, I'll second.
Okay, we have a second by Supervisor Lovingood. Roll call.
Commissioner Bagley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox. I'll come back to Commissioner Cox. Commissioner Curatello,
Aye.
Commissioner Lovingood,
Yes.
Commissioner McAllen,
Yes.
Commissioner Rao,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren,
Yes.
calling again Commissioner Cox. In her state, I'll call Commissioner Farrell.
Yes.
Okay, that item passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 7, which is a consideration of review of mitigated negative deck by the county for a minor use permit to establish a warehouse on approximately 20 acres as secret responsible agency for LAFCO SC number 450 and LAFCO SC number 450 City of San Bernardino irrevocable agreement for sewer service. I'm going to open the public hearing and have staff make a presentation.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Similarly, the City of San Bernardino, on behalf of the property owner and the developer, has submitted an application for commission review requesting authorization to extend sewer service outside its corporate boundaries. The agreement, Jeff, next slide, please, relates to a proposed development on 4 contiguous parcels, APN 0262, 041, 09, 13, 18, and 20. and this comprises approximately 20 acres. And it's located about 2,500 feet south of the intersection of Kendall Drive and Cajon Boulevard. Again, staff has reviewed this request for the provision of sewer service by the city of San Bernardino outside its boundaries against the criteria established by commission policy and state law. The parcel to be served is within the sphere of influence assigned the city of San Bernardino. The proposed development requires that it receive sewer service from the city of San Bernardino as outlined in the conditions of approval for the project. And finally, staff supports the city's request since sewer facilities is adjacent to the anticipated development and there are no other existing providers for that service within the area. So staff recommends that the commission approve LAFCO service contract 450 by taking the recommended actions on page 1 of the staff report. And Jeff, next slide, please. Which is also going to be on your screen. And before I end my presentation, I'd like to also acknowledge that we received a correspondence yesterday, which has been provided to the commission as well as to has been posted on our website regarding a storm drain agreement. This year, the commission's approval or authorization for sewer service has nothing to do with the storm drain agreement. However, we did provide that to you as well as it's on the website for review. So with that, that ends my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Commissioners, any questions, comments? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Motion to approve.
See if there's any public comment on the attendees.
I'm sorry, you're right. Mrs. Jones, is there any written comments submitted for this item?
No written comment for this item.
We'll now call on the public on Zoom who wish to speak on this item. Please click the raise hand button, or for those on Zoom via phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9. Seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing, bring back to the commission for deliberation and action. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, it's Curatello. I'll make the motion, but for your information, periodically I just get a goodbye and the thing hangs up on me. That's probably what happened to Kimberly. Anyway, but I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Bagley seconds.
Bagley seconds. All right, Ms. Jones, would you call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Bagley?
Yes.
Commissioner Cox? In her stead, I'll call Commissioner Farrell.
Yes.
Commissioner Curatello?
Yes.
Commissioner Lovingood?
Yes.
Commissioner McAllen?
Yes.
Commissioner Rao?
Yes.
And Commissioner Warren?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. That concludes 7. We'll go on to 8, which is a consideration of seek exemption and a review and adoption of amendments to the LAFCO Policy and Procedure Manual. Staff, I'll open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, if you can go to the next slide. LAFCO staff is proposing a number of changes to the Commission's Policy and Procedure Manual. The proposed amendments include changes to Section 1, the mission statement and Commission operations. Section 2, which is the accounting and financial. Section 3, human resources. And Section 5, which is the environmental review section of your manual. So for Section 1, staff is recommending an amendment to the election of chair and vice chair policy of the Commission's Rule of Order. That's Chapter 3, which is on page 2 of the staff report. Basically adding back the previous language that the Commission had regarding the 2 consecutive 1-year terms. But LAFCO staff is also adding the language regarding eligibility to be elected again as chair and vice chair after 2 years. And so that's for the section 1. For section 2, accounting and finance, staff is proposing various changes to the expense reimbursement policy of the Commission's financial policies for internal operations, as shown on the slide. That's starting on page 3 of the staff report. Jeff, please go back. And that is to match the county's approved policies changes that they did this year, and specifically, this clarifies the policy on mileage reimbursement for the commission. Staff is also proposing an amendment to the LAFCO filing fee refund policy, and that's chapter 2, Commission's financial policies for application processing. From 3 milestones to 2, which makes sense since we have not had one where a proposal was requested for withdrawal after it was noticed for consideration. So for section 3, that's human resources. Staff is proposing a new work at home telecommute policy under the Commission's working environment policies, chapter 1. And this is for your consideration. And we are also proposing removing obsolete language regarding a one-time incentive pay under the Commission's employment policies. That's in chapter 2. I want to point out that I bolded this one on display since this is not reflected on the list shown on the recommendations as outlined in the staff report. So apologize for that.
Wow.
I also want to point out that staff forwarded a supplemental staff report early this week that outlined some changes to the work at home telecommute policy from the Commission's legal counsel. That staff is requesting inclusion to the proposed changes. And so finally, last item, staff is proposing updates to section 5, the environmental review section, to include the recent SQL updates from 2019 and also some general updates that staff as well as the Commission's environmental consultant saw fit to include since we were already changing the section based on the SQL updates. I do want to correct a tiny typographical error on this section. This is found on chapter 2, environmental process and procedure under consultation, and it's item 7. It was brought to my attention that on line 2, subject to is written twice. It should just read where LAFCO is called upon to grant an approval for a project subject to CEQA for which another public agency and so on. So I apologize for that error as well. So staff is recommending that the Commission take the actions on page 1 of the staff report, including the item regarding the one-time incentive pay, which is now listed. Jeff, next slide. That's now listed on the recommendation. Jeffrey, please, next slide. Thank you. As well as incorporating the additional changes to the work at home telecommute policy from the supplemental staff report, the minor change to the environmental review policies that I just identified, and any changes that the Commission may wish to include at this time, and include it as part of the resolution exhibit A, which is your attachment number 3 of the staff report. So at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the Commission.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Commissioner Cox? Are you with us?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let you know that I logged back into the meeting. I was kicked out.
I didn't do that. Any commissioners have comments on these recommended changes? Commissioner Bagley, Commissioner Caratello, and I went over these changes, and we had our input to them. So, anyone want to comment or question? Seeing none, we'll. Mrs. Jones, are there any written comments submitted for this item?
No written comment for this item.
I'll call on the public now on Zoom wishing to speak on this item. Please click the raise hand button. Or for those on Zoom via phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9. Seeing none, at this time I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation and action.
Larry, is this too late to ask a question for clarification? This is
No.
Steve Earle.
Never too late to ask a question, Steve. Go ahead. You're on mute. Please unmute if you want to speak.
Steve, are you there?
You know, it hangs up on me, so it may be
No,
hanging up on him.
I'm here if that helps right now. Just, is all right?
Yeah, go ahead. You had a question?
Yes. On the environmental procedures, I forgot what statement it is. It's 2A regarding consultation. I don't know. I'm looking at, it starts off, this is a determination of whether the lead agency's EIR is adequate. And it basically says, regardless of whether LAFCO is a responsible agency, each lead agency, which sort of makes it generalized, I'm confused by this paragraph. Each lead agency carrying out any project within LAFCO's jurisdiction shall inform LAFCO of its intent. And that seems rather generic to me. So I'm wondering if that can be narrowed down. The way I read this is that any project within the county, LAFCO has to be notified and shared. And it just seems to be too aggressive for me. And my feeling was, if it's within LAFCO's jurisdiction, would we not always be a responsible agency? So my question is, when would we not be a responsible agency?
Basically, thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things that we always do, Commissioner Farrell, is that we participate in like the county's DRC, which is the Development Review Committee. And sometimes, so for example, the rationale for this is that, and it's good that we have that relationship with the county. We get to participate in their approval or the process for through land use services. And sometimes when an environmental document not necessarily requires LAFCO approval, but sometimes they would forget to identify that the water service provider is so-and-so water district. And in some cases, so that's how we kind of say we identify that through that process. Is we through that consultation process, we make those recommendations that, by the way, your sewer service provider for this project is so-and-so, and that would require an out-of-agency service agreement, or at times it doesn't require a LAFCO process, and we would just say you did not identify the correct water service provider. It should be Cucamonga Valley Water District instead of the West Valley Water District. So that's for us, that was really more of the reason why we wanted to have that process, so that we can identify, even outside of the LAFCO process, we can actually comment on making their document more accurate.
it seems like this is a condition of when we are determining whether or not their environmental document is acceptable or not. And that doesn't, it seems to be misplaced then, if that's the intent, but it's certainly a very good process. I think LAFCO should be part of the DRC. So if that's read and meant to be this, I'm fine. It was just an odd situation for me.
Yeah, this is Paula. This is in section 2A, which is just LAFCO's role as responsible agency. I think later on we speak about insufficiency of the lead agency's environmental review. So yeah.
Yeah, it's still misplaced because if we're not the lead agency,
it's in LAFCO's role as responsible agency.
I'm sorry, if we're not the responsible agency, it's not really our role then. So it's fine. It's fine. It still seems misplaced, but it's a good policy. Thank you. Nothing more, Larry. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I've forgotten. Do we have a motion yet?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion.
Okay, Ms. Cox, Dr. Cox made the motion. Is there a second?
Commissioner Bagley will second.
And Commissioner Bagley, second. Ms. Jones, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Bagley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuratalo,
Aye.
Commissioner Livingood,
Yes.
Commissioner McAllen,
Yes.
Commissioner Rao,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
Thank you.
That item passes unanimously. That concludes 8. We'll move on to 9, which is our third quarter review. I'm gonna, on the budget, I'll open the public hearing and have staff make a presentation. Staff?
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chair. This item is the time where we provide the commission with an update on our financial status for the third quarter. And due to the current situation, staff is not including any proposals in its year-end projections, which means from the get-go, staff is estimating that the commission would need to transfer from reserves approximately $91,000. So Jeff, next slide, please. For salaries and benefits, we are at 75% benchmark of the approved budget authority. Next slide. Service and supplies, we're also at 75%, which is also normal for the third quarter. Year end includes significant expenditures related to the office lease, the subscription to the county street network for digital mapping, and payment of the commission's net pension liability. Next slide. With regards to revenues, the commission has received 91% through the third quarter. This includes interest revenues of a little over $12,000 and all the mandatory apportionments payments, that's 100%. However, only 39% of the projected fees and deposits have been received. And as you can see on the table, we've out of 11 that we budgeted, we only received 3 proposals. Next slide, please. As of March 31, the commission's cash in the county's treasury was $524,218. And the breakdown of our cash balances are shown in the chart. Then the chart shows the projected revenues and expenditures with a deficit of almost like $91,000. Through the third quarter, next slide, please. Expenditures are slightly under budget. It's actually at 75%, 74.9. So it's at 75% benchmark. That's again normal. But again, revenues are not meeting our targets. So staff is not recommending any budget adjustments, rather as part of the year-end financial review. Staff will be recommending the appropriate budget adjustments then. Next slide. Staff is recommending that the commission receive and file and provide direction to staff for the remainder of the year. That ends my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Commissioners, any questions? Seeing none, Ms.
I
Jones,
have,
are there any written comments?
Sorry, Chair, I have Ms. Cox raised her hand. Ms. Cox, do you have any concern?
It's been raised for a while. I don't know if she's raised it again or hasn't taken it down. She took it down.
Okay, she took it back. Thank you.
Ms. Jones, are there any written comments submitted for this item?
No, sir, no written comments for this item.
I call on the public on Zoom who wish to speak on this item. Please click the raise hand button. For those on Zoom via phone, please raise your hands by pressing *9. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for deliberation and action. Direction. No direction to staff.
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Cox. I'll move staff's recommendation at this time.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Commissioner Bagley seconds.
Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Jones.
Commissioner Bagley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Aye.
Commissioner Curtalo,
Aye.
Commissioner
Anybody
Livingood,
here?
Yes.
Commissioner McAllen,
Yes.
Commissioner Rao,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
That passes unanimously, and we'll move on to item 10A and 10B, which are two parts. First, we will discuss item 10A, which is the proposed schedule of fees and deposits and charges for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. I'm going to open the public hearing and have staff make a presentation. Staff?
Thank you again, Chair. Every year, the Commission reviews changes to the fee schedule. 2 years ago, the Commission expressed its desire to do gradual increases tied to CPI, which is 2.9% this year. This slide provides you with the proposed changes to the annexation reorganization fees based on the CPI. Next slide. And the next one should be these are the changes to the out-of-agency service contract fees, also again based on CPI. The one fee that we reduced is the non-development related out-of-agency service contract, or 56133 exemptions, which is at the very bottom, which we increased last year due to what we believe included work staff puts in preparing the documents, including environmental determination. However, after further review, staff made the decision to reduce this back to almost what it was 2 years ago. So those are the changes. Staff recommends that the Commission take the recommended actions on page 1 of the staff report. Jeff, next slide. Thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at this
time. Commissioners, any comments, questions? Seeing none, Ms. Jones, were there any written comments received on this?
No written comments received on this item.
So the public who wish to speak on this item, please either click the raise hand button, or for those on Zoom via phone, please raise your hands by pressing *9. Seeing none, at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring back the Commission for deliberation and action. Commissioners? Is there a motion?
Commissioner Bagley moves the staff's recommendation on the fees.
And a second from
Commissioner Cox,
Commissioner Cox. Thank you. Ms. Jones, call the roll.
Commissioner Bagley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
aye.
Commissioner Curatolo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lovingood,
Yes.
Commissioner McAllen,
Yes,
Commissioner Rao,
Yes.
and Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
that item passes unanimously. Item 10B is on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021. I'll open the public hearing. Staff presentation, please.
Thank you. Now we are going to consider the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2021. Next slide, Jeff, please. This slide shows you basically the summary of your budget that shows your expenditures, revenues, and budget reserves. Next slide, please. Staff is proposing the following changes related to compensation and benefits. Staff is recommending no across-the-board increases to take place for fiscal year 2020-21. This would include rescinding the Commission's cost of living adjustment, which the Commission approved in April 2018. This also, we are recommending foregoing all compensation and benefit increases that the county approved for its exempt employees that were to take effect July 2020. This includes increases in the medical premium subsidy, the medical reimbursement plan, the retirement medical trust, and its 3% COLA increases for this year, for this fiscal year, and the next 2 years. And I want to thank staff for supporting not to do any increases this year. Next slide, please. This slide shows some of the highlights for fiscal year 2021. Again, no COLA for all employees. There's a one-step increase for 3 employees. Longevity pay for 3 employees. Leave cash outs as permitted by policy. And one thing unique about fiscal year 2021 is that it has an additional pay period, 27 pay periods instead of 26 for the year. And since the county pay schedule is every 2 years, or 2 weeks, I mean, the result is an additional pay period every 10 years. So as discussed in the reserve portion of this report, which I will come back to, staff is recommending creating a salary reserve to fund the next time that there is an extra pay period, which takes place every 10 years. So the annual budget would include a 1/10 contribution beginning on fiscal year 21-22. Next slide, please. The good news is that our SB Sarah retirement rates are going down. Everyone else's contribution rates are actually going up. So that's the one good news that I have. For fiscal year 2021-22, year 2, no COLAs are anticipated, but adopting the benefit increases that I identified earlier. For fiscal year 2022-23, we would have the COLAs back, and then for fiscal year 23-24, a LAFCO employee is scheduled to have retired at year 3. However, for budget purposes, the position is funded for year 4, but I will be evaluating that position, the staffing model, and duties as well, whether or not they can be reassigned or absorbed. So next slide, please. With regards to proposal processing, staff has been coordinating with agencies regarding potential applications for the next fiscal year. I think we've narrowed it down this time more accurately. Next slide. With regard to programs and projects for service review, the commission determined the next set of service reviews in the following order: healthcare districts, solid waste, street lighting, parks and rec, roads, and any other review as determined by the commission. And so in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, staff recommends that healthcare districts be deferred and instead proceed with solid waste followed by street lighting. Staff is also working towards completing the 2019 data entry for our fiscal indicators, hopefully by August. And finally, the Commission's governance training program is budgeted to continue. However, if public gathering restrictions continue rather than an in-person session, LAFCO could sponsor a webinar. Staff will apprise the commission at the first quarter update whether or not we will move forward with a governance training program for the year. Next slide, please. There are some highlights on agency costs for the year. We are proposing no inventoriable equipment budgeted for purchase the next 2 years. Liability insurance is through SDRMA. The insurance code is $14,238. That's generally the same as last year. And for auditing services, we will be entering the 5th and final year of the contract with Davis Farr, and the Southern Region LAFCOs will begin the next RFP process for auditing services. And finally, CalCUP charges are decreasing by 45%. The next slide, please. In addition, thanks to comments made last year by Commissioner Cox regarding why we were paying so much for our server, we found out we were paying for their server space we were allocated, which was far more than what we needed. LAFCO staff worked with County ISD to reduce our allocated space, which actually reduces our cost by almost a third. Also, the lease for use of the Northern Regional Event Center as the Commission's meeting chambers actually expired in June 2019. Well, not 2020. It was actually June 2019. I apologize for that error on the slide. Therefore, IVDA has provided us a 2-year contract renewal for the Commission's review. That's on your attachment number 5, or attachment number 6, I mean. And so in this case, because it expired in 2019, the contract amendment, the 2-year contract amendment expires at the end of the fiscal year. So should the Commission support the contract renewal, staff recommends that the Commission authorize me to sign the contract amendment. Next slide, please. Another highlight for the year is our ongoing costs associated with the office here at the train depot. This slide provides you the annual breakdown of the costs. I have reached out to SDCTA regarding options on either reducing our costs or recalculating our payments. The admin committee has also reached out to SDCTA as well. And so I will apprise the commission on what they are able to do to lower our costs. Next slide, please. This slide is our net pension liability breakdown that shows you the actuary increases through the years and the contributions we have made. What this does not show you is that prior to us paying the $180,000 that we paid in 2019, we've actually been funding our net pension liability and putting it away as a reserve fund every year since 2015. Next slide, please. Finally, as mentioned earlier, this year we will be funding an extra pay period, which is roughly equal to about $30,000. As a result, staff is recommending creating a salary reserve to fund the next time we have to fund this additional pay period, which is, as I said earlier, in another 10 years. Therefore, starting fiscal year 21-22, the annual budget would include 1/10 contribution to this salary reserve. Next slide. Staff recommends that the commission take the recommended actions on page 1 of the staff report, which includes adopting the proposed budget for fiscal year 2020-21, direct the executive officer to sign the contract amendment for the commission's use of the Norton Regional Event Center, direct staff to forward the adopted proposed budget to all the independent special districts, cities and towns, and the county for their comment pursuant to Government Code Section 56381. And finally, schedule a public hearing for May 20, 2020 for formal approval of the amendments to the policy and procedure manual. This would include rescinding the approved COLAs that were to take effect July 18, 2020, and adding the new salary reserve to fund the extra pay period. And finally, adopt the final budget for fiscal year 2020-21. So that ends my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Sam. I want to compliment you for your budget, and I want to thank the staff for stepping up, even though it, we're having a hard time. And I appreciate very much you and the staff accepting the reduction, if you will, or not the increase in pay due to COLA. I think that's admirable, and I compliment you on that. I also, as you know, I reached out to SBCTA on the CAM rent, and they did agree to reduce it by about half. Have you had discussions with Dwayne on that?
No, I haven't, Mr. Chair. But yeah, when you mentioned that, yeah, it is anticipated to go down half of our current CAM cost. So that's really good. That's about $12,000 that we would be saving. Yet we don't have anything in writing, so I didn't want to preempt that. That's all.
Well, I would suggest you get with Dwayne and get that in writing before they forget it.
Will do, and once I get that done, and hopefully we can get that back to the commission as soon as we can get that amendment done.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Rao, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you very much. Sam, I just wanted to thank you and your leadership at this time. The staff will take its lead from you. Thank you for leading by example. It is a very difficult time period for all of us, and I really think that these preemptive steps will help the organization, and I just wanted to commend you on all that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And ditto from me to all of that. Supervisor Cox? I mean, Commissioner Cox, Dr. Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the chair intervening on our behalf regarding our rent. I'm not quite sure what rents are down the hill, but 111,000 seems a little steep. If there's any way we can continue to negotiate on a rent reduction, that would be just wonderful. Regarding the 3% COLA that is bypassed in the budget, I think that's the only thing that gives me pause. In the budget, the COLA is just intended to keep staff's salaries even from one year to the next because of inflationary factors. Is there any reconsideration for reintroducing this COLA, or have we introduced additional steps in future years that will help make staff whole?
So again, yeah, thank you for that comment. We, unfortunately, yes, it also equates to exactly, almost exactly the extra pay period. And so if we didn't have that extra pay period, I think we would have been able to continue and not have to rescind that COLA. Unfortunately, we never anticipated. Well, we kind of knew that we have this extra pay period. However, it's a huge hit on us for a single year. Have that extra pay period. Again, I think having that salary reserve moving forward will take care of that, and then hopefully, if we get anything in terms of additional funding, then I can bring back to the commission probably mid-year or even at the first quarter, if something to bring something to you.
And I think that's something we need really take a look at and keep on top of, because we certainly don't want to penalize our staff. And I don't know if there's any funding that may come forward out of the federal government or the state government as a result of this COVID-19 that might be usable also. So I would suggest we look into that too. Commissioner Bagley.
Hi, Sam. I just want to commend you too for some very wise planning. It's really uncharted territory that we're in right now. The correction to the stock market is going to have huge ramifications for unfunded pension liabilities. None of the agencies that we deal with know exactly where they're going to be fiscally in the next few months. And there could be some real drastic reductions for everybody. So I appreciate the staff for going to COLA right now. My one comment is that the COLA in the past was just randomly selected. We're going to really have to pay attention to the cost of living indexes in the future. But it's really unknown right now, and everybody needs to tighten their budget and be prepared to ride out this storm, wherever it's going to land. So I commend you and the staff for that. And in the future, hopefully we can make things whole, but we really just don't know where we're going to go right now. We're in very dangerous territory for everybody. That graphic chart from the city of Adelanto about their unfunded ability in their general fund should be a warning to all of us. I am really worried about the ramifications for other cities and agencies too. So it's just a tough time, and we're all just going to have to do the best we can.
Right on, Jim. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? Ms. Jones, are there any written comments on this item?
No, sir, no written comments on this item.
Public who are wishing to speak on this item, please either click the raise hand button, or for those on Zoom via phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to commission for deliberation and action. Commissioners? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the staff's recommendation with again, a commendation to Sam for very wise planning about how we're going to proceed in the unknown direction we're going.
Mr. Bagley, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll
Jim
second.
Curatello, I'll second that. Go ahead.
We have a second by Caratello. Ms. Jones, please call the roll.
I apologize. I know you hear the train going by, but Commissioner Bagley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Aye.
Commissioner Curatello,
Aye.
Commissioner Lovinggood,
Yes.
Commissioner McAllen,
Yes.
Commissioner Rao,
Yes.
and Commissioner Warren. Commissioner Warren, in her stead, I'll call Commissioner Dennison.
Yes.
That item passes unanimously, and we'll move on now to information items. Legislative report, Sam?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The legislature is in hiatus. Nothing much is going on. However, I wanted to apprise the commission on SB 799. In January, we had sent in our letter of support if amended. And all this time I was working with staff from Senator Dodd's office, as well as staff from the Senate Local Government Finance. The amendments were introduced on March 11, which they heard our concerns, so they could not extend this provision to all LAFCOs. It remains a pilot program, so they went ahead and just extend the sunset provisions to the pilot program for 5 years to January 1st, 2026. And then the required reporting to the legislature on our participation is also extended to January 1, 2025. So therefore, I'm requesting the commission adopt a support position for SB 799. However, I just received an email yesterday from Senator Dodd's office that they have decided to hold SB 799 until next year, as according to them, does not fit the urgent COVID-19 bills that are encouraged to move forward. Nonetheless, the commission can move forward with its support as recommended, or if you wish to table this for now and just direct me to come back when they bring back the bill next year. But I was just trying to get this squared away because the amendments were there, and so I just wanted to put our support letter as soon as we can. However, things have changed. So,
well, we don't know, when the bill comes back, what shape it'll be in. So my recommendation would be we hold off until it's reintroduced.
that's fine by me.
Any other comments? Let's go on to your executive officer's oral report.
Yeah, so I would just like to start by saying to the commission and our community members out there that we really appreciate your patience. We're all adapting to some of these new procedures, and you've been very patient along the way. We've had some issues with our webinar today, but we thank you all for your patience. Operationally, I think it's important to convey that we are still continuing to operate. We continue to remain open, just not open to the public personally, but we are available as we continue to work through this. We can be reached by phone, email, and there's ways to get information from the LAFCO website. We have been doing agency meetings via teleconference, and we've actually started, and most likely moving forward, do more of the video conferencing as our way to communicate. In fact, staff has been using this when we have our internal staff meetings. So again, I would like to thank the Commission for its continued support and staff for being able to adapt to this unique times. And we, the rest of the staff, are trying our best to continue to keep everyone on the Commission and your respective organizations up to speed. And if there's more that we can do for you and your respective jurisdictions, please let me know or let staff know, and we'll try to do all we can to assist. So, and I just want to let everyone know that in order to adopt a budget, we will have a May hearing to do that. And at this time, we don't anticipate a June hearing. So we will have a May hearing. That ends my executive officer oral report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Commissioner comments? Supervisor Lovingood?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Hey, going with the Atalanta report in August, just some highlights, if we can request an amendment to that, is to bring forward what their current balances are. And I mean, there's a lot of information. Hearing that someone has implemented basic standard accounting practices is certainly disappointing, because they function for 31 years that I've been up here. They were functioning well early on in the 90s, and so the fact of the lack of accounting process is also an update on where they are on lawsuits, because there's been a number of pending lawsuits that I think we would want to be informed with. And then the big question is this was presented with a lot of what ifs. If we do this, if we get taxed, if we get this. So what happens if they don't? That's the answer I want to understand.
Good point.
We'll convey that to them, Supervisor Lovingood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now that concludes my comments.
Other comments? Well, I want to thank all of the commissioners for your patience with this process. I know it's a little more difficult, but we're all in this together, and it's going to resolve itself soon. I'm hopeful that we will get back to some semblance of normal soon. Obviously, it's going to be a little different, but I think probably there'll be more use of technology, but now that people are more comfortable with it. And in some cases that's good. In some cases that might not be so good, but I do appreciate staff. I know this is a difficult working situation and that you're pressing forward to getting the important work done at LAFCO, and I definitely appreciate that. Just remember to stay safe, observe all of the distancing requirements and et cetera that we're all putting up with, and I hope you all have a great weekend.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, if there are no more commissioner comments, just make sure you open to the public.
I haven't got there yet. That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay, are there any comments from the public? Ms. Jones, any written comments?
No written comments received.
If the public wishes to speak to us on an item, any item that's under our purview, please click on the raise the hand button. For those on Zoom via phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9. Seeing none, if there's no further business to come before the commission, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Adjourned, everyone. Have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay healthy, everybody. Thank you.
Seeing your faces.
Thank you.
Sam, Jeffrey, before you go,
Yes.
Real quick, the display on your shared screen,